13.7 billion years ago, the Big Bang sparked a chain reaction that made everything in existence. 4.6 billion years ago, our Earth formed of the matter. 3.5 billion years ago, the first life came into existence. 1.2 billion years ago, the first multicellular organisms appeared. 500 million years ago came a time period called the Cambrian explosion, where life on Earth rapidly multiplied and evolved. 230 million years ago, dinosaurs reigned over the Earth. During this time, around 80 million years ago, the first shoots of grass poked through the ground. 65 million years ago, the order of Earth changed and the dinosaurs died out and the mammals rose up and took their place. 60 million years ago, we ascended from the trees and began to walk on two legs. 800,000 years ago, our brains started increasing rapidly in size as we continued to rise and dominate the planet. 200,000 years ago, the first modern humans walked on the planet. This is the story of evolution. But all this would not be possible if it wasn't for that first cell. Our entire existence depended on this one cell. What obstacles did this cell have to overcome, and how did it come into existence? The first obstacle would be the development of DNA, the decoding machinery necessary to decode DNA, and the energy for these processes to work. Even the most simple of cells contains all three of these parts. DNA is the blueprint of a living thing and directs each part of the cell from the microscopic level. It is a ladder of information made up of 4 different chemicals, shown as the letters A, C, G, and T. These letters form a code that tell the cell different things. A gene is a stretch of DNA that codes for a particular thing, like a protein. Proteins are made out of amino acids. There are 20 different amino acids that, when combined in different ways, make up different proteins. DNA is the recipe book that combines amino acids into the proper proteins. DNA is written in a code, and for the cell to know what to do with the information, it must be decoded. That's where RNA comes in. RNA runs along the DNA strand, reads out the code, and copies one side of it. These strands are sent to the ribosomes, which are the protein makers of the cell. They read the messenger RNA and grab the proper amino acids to form a chain. A chain of amino acids isn't good enough though. It needs to be in the proper shape for it to function. Chaperones help take the chain to another machine called the chaperonin and make sure it doesn't start folding before it gets there. In the chaperonin, the protein chain is folded to the correct shape. These processes would not be possible without another component called the ATP synthesis, which gives the cell energy to complete these functions. The problem is, the code for the DNA decoder is coded in the DNA, along with the code for the ATP synthesis machine, which can't be decoded without the machine, which won't work without the energy machine. It is a 3-way cycle. This is one of the biggest problems the first cell would have to overcome. Another problem is the environment. The first cell was formed as some sort of primordial soup of chemicals that eventually combined into the components for the first life form. Primitive Earth's atmosphere was thought to be similar to our atmosphere today, except the problem is the high concentrations of oxygen and nitrogen. In these conditions, the reactions necessary for life would be destroyed as fast as they were created because of the oxidizing atmosphere. So scientists suggest a different atmosphere must have existed. An atmosphere with reduced oxygen to protect the developing life. This brings new problems though. This new atmosphere would have a reduced ozone layer, which allow ultraviolet rays to destroy any developing life. The destruction of sugars and other molecules is also a problem. Sugars and nitrogen bases such as cytosine decay quickly and some are very unstable. Life would have had to form quickly before they were destroyed. Another problem for this first brave little cell would be the formation of information. Information is the key to life. In the first life, information would have had to line up in a readable way by chance and not by natural selection like the processes of later organisms. So the first cell is dependent on chemistry, but there's nothing in the building blocks of DNA that would make certain chemicals join up together, any more than ink molecules linking up in an ink spill would form letters, words, and sentences. Another thing to understand is what the information is made of isn't as important as the information it conveys. Physicist Paul Davies says, it's the software of the living cell that's the mystery, not the hardware. In other words, we know what the cell is made of, but how it was told to arrange itself is what we don't know. Randomness is considered the key to this problem, but how much randomness would it take for the cell to develop? First of all, how much information would have to be lined up properly in the DNA sequence for the first life form to exist? The Mycoplasma genitalium is the simplest life form of bacteria today. It contains no cell walls and cannot survive without living in its host's respiratory and genital tract. This organism contains 482 genes in its DNA, which is still quite complex. Maybe something even simpler existed at the dawn of life. Scientists calculated what they thought would be the simplest life form that could have existed and came up with an organism that contains a minimum of 387 genes. In a 2009 New Scientist article, it says, "There's no doubt that the common ancestor possessed DNA, RNA, and proteins, a universal genetic code, ribosomes, ATP, and a protein-powered enzyme for making ATP. In short, then, the last common ancestor of all life looks pretty much like a modern cell." So this first cell will need to have at least 387 genes and would be able to survive in a very specific environment with a constant stream of nutrients. We will assume this cell was lucky and developed in this type of environment, and assume also that only 10 amino acids are necessary per protein, that there was something that propelled these amino acids to join together in a certain way, and that water, which normally breaks apart bonds between amino acids, and doesn't happen. We are left with a chance in 1 followed by 5,000 zeros. Time tries to swoop in and save the day, but can't fix the situation because according to math there is 10 to the 80th power atoms in the universe, 10 to the 12th power interactions per second, 10 to the 18th power seconds since the Big Bang, so only 10 to the 110th power interactions possible. This may seem like a huge number, but consider how many different times it would take for the right sequence of information to line up. In the end, we're left with a chance of 1 in 10 to the 4,925th power. We are still figuring out how we got here, but we have made many strides in the last few years. Some still wonder if we're ever going to be able to answer this question. Others are hoping we'll find more answers as we explore further into our universe. Maybe we'll find out as our search extends past our own planet into the galaxies. No matter how we got here, we can all agree something miraculous happened a long time ago, and we are all something pretty special.